So here we are on a Saturday morning, at least in the Pacific time zone, in April 2020. And of course, we're all deeply aware that we are in the midst of an unusual global event, the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. And that is making various changes seem very apparent in ways that persons not versed in the Dharma or other ways of thinking about the nature of reality are finding puzzling, or they seem unexpected, or these changes, the spread of a virus, etc., seems as though it came out of the blue. And I want to talk about a number of different things this morning, and then we'll close with a period of compassion practice, because the world and our own hearts need more compassion perhaps than ever these days. But I wanted to talk about a few different things. One of them is cause and effect, which in Buddha Dharma is often encapsulated in the word Dharma. Dharma has many meanings. One of them is all phenomenon. And within Dharma is the word karma. In karma, most simply can be translated as cause and effect. Karma is a word that connotes a lot of things to our Western minds. We think of reincarnation, a child remembering past lives, being punished at some point down the road for misdeeds. Your karma is going to get you. And those are interesting interpretations and perhaps have grains of, in true Dharma teachings, of accuracy to them. But the actual meaning that is very relevant right now, it's very relevant all the time, but right now in the middle of a pandemic, is cause and effect, causes and conditions leading to outcomes. So at the most simple level, if one of us is out and about and comes into contact with a surface where someone has coughed or had droplets touch that surface very recently, or we shake hands with someone who's maybe coughed into their hands, or someone who's asymptomatic but is carrying this virus, causes and conditions lead to the possibility that I, let's say, have a virus on my hand, and I may rub my eye, pick my nose, lick my finger, and end up with the virus entering my body, whereupon I may become symptomatic or I may stay asymptomatic. Why am I talking about that? Because it doesn't happen by accident. I know you know that, but it happens by causes and conditions. If I wake up this morning, as one of my patients said this week, he said he just woke up on the wrong side of the bed. He said he felt angry, disgruntled, frustrated, very kind of aggro, agitated, explosive inside. He woke up that way for no reason. He's incorrect about the no reason part. There'd be causes and conditions that led to the emotional feeling tone and then the story that arose when he woke up. He may have slept poorly. He may have had an unpleasant dream that he either remembered or didn't remember. He may have had too much sugar, caffeine, alcohol the night before. He may have been troubled by something subconsciously. Things do not happen. Phenomena does not arise with no cause. So the bird that flew past my visual field when I was meditating with you, eyes open, in case you wondered where I was looking, I was just looking just above my laptop screen out the window to a forest, mountain, and sky, and a bird flew across. That bird had causes and conditions. It had fertilization, 2 birdie parents and an egg that was nurtured enough that that egg hatched, and that fledgling bird learned to fly, didn't get eaten so far by a predator, and happened to be out hunting or fishing or playing or seeking food for its young or whatever when it flew across my visual field. I know you know that. But we often act as though unpleasant things befall us, as though it's an accident, as though this frightening and distressing occurrence of a virus, which arguably is a sentient being, as though this has befallen us out of the blue. Or we look to blame a cause and condition that has nothing to do with us. Seafood market in a Chinese province, thoughtless traveler who returned to Canada and didn't self-isolate, a stranger who didn't wash their hands. Be very careful about placing blame. Causes and conditions involve all of us. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to speak against the mind's tendency to create a lot of suffering for ourselves by feeling like things happen to us, feeling like we are victims of circumstances we can't control, which essentially leads to a sense of terror and anxiety and rootlessness. This is coming to get me and there's nothing I can do. Lama Mark was teaching an online class this week, and he was speaking about, Lama Mark, if you don't know, is one of my root teachers, beautiful teacher in the Kagyu and Drikung Tibetan traditions. And he was talking about the causes and conditions leading to the proliferation of viruses and the mutations of viruses, including many, many human acts, like the change in the environment, pollution, taking trees, changing the eco-landscape. I'm trying to be delicate here and maybe not express this in a way that would be based in greed, hatred, and delusion. But sometimes humans act as though there are no causes and conditions, no effects that will come out of actions, karma. Not taking care of forests, not taking care of the air, not taking care of the biosphere, burning too much coal, fossil fuel, gasoline in ways that can hurt the ozone layer, and so on and so on and so on. We can act as though on the individual or cultural or global level, what we do doesn't have consequences. And then we're gobsmacked, to use, a funny term, when things change. When the karma of the cause and effect comes to fruition, the polar ice caps melt. Ooh, big surprise. I'm not being sarcastic. I'm pointing out the flaw, the ignorance in our thinking when we forget or neglect to attend to the fact that causes have effects, maybe not right away. So here we are in a pandemic, and many people are feeling frightened and victimized, and as though this came out of the blue. There are causes and conditions to everything. So let's take it from the global to the individual this morning. Each of us, as we are in our own experience, our own direct experience of our family or personal reaction and impact upon us of the current circumstances, we have the ability, and I don't mean to say it's easy, and I certainly don't want any of us, myself included, beating ourselves up if we find this difficult, but we do have the ability to work with causes and conditions in our own minds. So let me bring this down to feeling anxious or frightened, angry or judgmental, confused or baffled. The three root poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion. When we're feeling a negative emotion, a harmful emotion, an unpleasant emotion, a non-productive emotion in the mind, what can we do? There are causes and conditions that lead to that mental emotional state. My patient who woke up on the wrong side of the bed and had a day of feeling angry, frustrated, wanting to lash out verbally, and really, really unpleasant mind states. There were causes and conditions for that. So think of a mind state you had this morning or yesterday. It could have been small or large, but it was an unpleasant mind state, a state of worry, a state of fear, a state of judgment, negative judgment towards self or other, a state of anger, pain, grief, helplessness, frustration, etc. Think of an event, think of a mind state. And then as best you're able, trace it back a little bit. So now you're watching this on that stage of the mind, and you're watching this reaction to maybe fearfulness about going out to get groceries, and some judgmental thoughts about, can I trust other people are behaving wisely? And if I go out and get groceries, will I be potentially exposed to a virus because other people have been sloppy, not washed their hands, not taken precautions? Let's say that was the mind state. Please work with your own, the one that came up for you. It can feel like that came out of the blue, but of course it didn't. So imagine that mind state as a character on the stage of your mind as we were working within the open awareness practice. Cheryl's reaction to the thought of going to the grocery store is the one I've made up. Watch the mind state and trace back that character's development. What do I mean? Well, maybe I'm cheating a little bit here because my early training was in theater and acting, and I spent a lot of time being given a script with a character in it. In this case, the character of the person who's frightened about going to the grocery store because their story making is that other people may or may not be being safe, and that might increase their own exposure. That story making may have some accuracy to it, obviously. May not, may partly. Each story needs to be dissected. Now, as an actor, if I was handed that script to play that character, I would put forward good actors, well-trained actors, the ones you watch on stage or screen and who move you to tears and hope, and it feels so real you can't distinguish it from acting in real life. They go back and think about what led that character to this moment in this script, saying this line. What was their childhood? What are their broken dreams? What are their hopes? What wonderful thing happened to them this morning? What did they eat for breakfast? To bring them to that moment of that emotional feeling or line they're saying on stage. Now, what if you did that to the character of this negative mind state from today or yesterday? Irritation because, I don't know, your neighbor's dog was barking, let's say, incessantly, and you found that annoying and intrusive, and you were looking for a nice quiet afternoon to read your book. So there was a mind state of aversion and negativity and a bit of frustration that silly neighbor didn't get their dog to be quiet, or that silly dog didn't stop yapping at that squirrel, or whatever. The causes and conditions, the karma, are the steps that led to the current mind state. And this is super important because the Buddha famously said on the night of his enlightenment, or the morning of his enlightenment, when he touched the earth, I see you, builder, you should build no more. And he said, anything built can be unbuilt. This was a profound statement of karma. Any mental state, any relationship problem, any mountain, house, computer screen, pair of meditation bells, anything built can be unbuilt. This is extremely good news because it means any negative mental state of suffering, dukkha, or confusion was built through causes and conditions, misunderstanding, imperfect data, good data that we interpreted incorrectly, old patterns, old fears. I've met 4 bears before, and all of the other 4 times they ate my friend. When I meet my 5th bear, I have patterns, I have memories, I have facts that lead me to be terrorized by the 5th bear and assume it's going to eat my friend, and so on. What is the take-home message here? The take-home message here is any emotional state, particularly let's talk about negative ones, can be unbuilt. It can be dissolved in its place. This is difficult. For the majority of us, understanding this is super simple. You all understand it. You understood it by the time I began speaking about it a few minutes ago. You understood that a mental emotional state is built on facts, fictions, emotion, physiology, story. I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. And if it has been built, it can be unbuilt. But boy, oh boy, it's tough to unbuild that state sometimes, isn't it? So the one you brought to mind, a negative state from today or yesterday, bring it onto the stage of your awareness. And pick it apart a little bit. Create the backstory, we call it in theater, the backstory for the character who's feeling those feelings you were feeling. What led to that state? And there can be a lot of factors, multiple causalities of karma. So let me break that down a bit further because I think it might be helpful for some of you that have not heard it put this way before. Most of my students will have heard this from me at some point. I like to put forward that an emotion, in this case, the emotion you're thinking of, that was a negative emotion from today or yesterday about something. An emotion is, the way I like to put it, to simplify it so you can work with this, is an emotion, an emotion is physiology plus story. Physiology plus story. What do I mean by that? So let's say I'm having some consternation in the body and mind about some trepidation, fear, anxiety, judgment about going grocery shopping. There are 2 things going on, physiology plus story. Well, you've all experienced this. You experience it day in, day out, moment in, moment out, breath in, breath out, if you have the eyes to see, and if you can focus deep enough to feel these shifts. But the emotion is physiology plus story. Physiology, there may be some cortisol and adrenaline, anxiety and worry hormones, neurochemistry. And then there's a story. It might not be safe for me to grocery shop. And then that story quickly cascades off in many directions with many other stories. But I need groceries. Well, do I really? I've got enough rice and beans. I don't really need fresh produce today. Is it worth the risk? What's the best time to go to the store? Maybe in the morning when less people have been in there. Yeah, but they're cleaning all day. Gosh, what will I do if I see someone who's coughing or seems maybe not mentally, emotionally stable, and maybe is not able to practice good hygiene right now? And story. But what I just slowed down can happen in the mind. So we've got physiology, we've got story, and then we've got those two dancing and making a mess. The physiology reacts to the story. The bear is going to eat my friend. Way more physiology. It might be dangerous to go grocery shopping today. Floods the physiology. The physiology alters the brain chemistry, helps us interact with the story differently, causes and conditions karma. Why am I bringing this to your attention today? Because I hope it will help each of us as we work with our reactions and stories, our physiology and stories that lead to emotions, particularly difficult emotions in this challenging time. This time, which in terms of Buddha Dharma, is in a way a concentration of the teachings of Dharma, which is everything's impermanent, everything changes, things have causes and conditions. It's not the external event that's the problem, it's the way we react to it. I don't mean to sound flippant. Becoming infected with COVID-19, as some of my friends have, I've got friends in the States, one of who's got a fairly serious bone cancer. He got a nice dose of COVID-19 and was pretty sick for 10 days, but stayed at home and drank tea and took Tylenol for the fever, and he has mostly recovered. And also his bone cancer treatment is going extremely well. So some very good outcomes there. I mention that though, to make the hypothetical literal. Some of you have friends or family or people you know who have been infected with COVID-19. And of course, there are many of us who may be infected but have not been tested. If we get infected with the virus, if we manifest symptoms, if those symptoms get very worse, if those symptoms get so bad that they hasten our death and we die from the complications related to that virus, that would be an impermanence that I hope doesn't happen to any beings on the planet, although it's going to happen to plenty more before this is potentially tamed. But what I'm trying to say, and please understand, most of you have worked with me for a while, so you'll understand. If you know, take it with a grain of salt. If you're new to me, new to the Dharma, new to this way of thinking. The causes and conditions that would lead to my death, be it an airplane crash, be it someone stabbing me, be it when I'm 99, when I take my last graceful breath as the wind leaves my body due to old age and the body shutting down, be it cancer, be it a virus, be it complications from any illness. The death part is inevitable. The causes and conditions of being mortal mean that death is inevitable. In Buddha Dharma, there's a saying, death is inevitable, only the time is not known. I'm not in any way attempting to minimize the ferocity of this viral epidemic and pandemic and how unfortunate it is. But I want to bring us into alignment with the fact that we were all going to die anyway. The causes and conditions say that mortality equals eventual death. How do we relate to this unusual, the word unprecedented has been used a great deal, a fairly accurate word right now, situation we find ourselves in? Well, hopefully we act no differently than we would act at our very best without a pandemic. We act with compassion. We remember we're interconnected beings. We remember we are all in this together. And that's what we're starting to see at the best across nations and certainly in our own backyard. Some beautiful, beautiful shifts in possibly human consciousness toward recognizing our shared humanity, recognizing compassion, recognizing interconnectedness. For example, such a small example, and some of you have examples, I invite you to type them in the chat box if you wish, and share examples of fundamental interconnectedness, neighbors being more neighborly, that you have seen in this last week. Before this class, I took my dogs for a walk for about 45 minutes in the neighborhood here down the road. And what I noticed was I and the drivers driving by me, there weren't many, I lived in a fairly remote place, waved at each other, smiled and nodded at each other much, much more than on a normal dog walk in Maple Bay. These moments of we're in this together, acknowledging a passerby, a human connectedness of we're not in our truck bubble and our walking the dog bubble. A lot more hugging with my teens. There's one. What have you noticed in terms of maybe a preciousness and an interconnectedness and an acknowledging of people? Please share some of your thoughts, inspire and soothe the hearts of each other. One of the beautiful things that's happening around BC and of course around the world, I think we first heard of it in Italy about people coming out on their balconies and singing and praising the frontline workers. That's now been happening all over. And here in BC, people going out at 7 p.m. in North Van to applaud and cheer the healthcare workers when they change their shift at 7 p.m. And here in Duncan, in the small town that I make my home outside of, they've started a salute at 7 p.m. where the fire trucks and the ambulances go and do a little drive-by by our local hospital with their bells and their sirens on. We got home last night from a veterinary emergency hospital. Looks like he's going to make it. And we got home at 7 p.m., got out of our car at the top of our home here in our driveway, and we heard the sirens and the bells. We thought, oh, it must be 7 o'clock. There you go. So what I want you to share, if you wish, in the chat box is an example, please, of something that you've seen that is positive, that is inspiring, that is an example of interconnectedness, an example of people remembering we're not as distant as we thought we were. Watching parents give their kids pots and pans, and starting at 6:50, the kids really looking forward to it. Yeah, the pots and pans to say what? Those pots and pans, the singing, the yelling, the sirens are saying, thank you. We're in this together. We realize we're interconnected. We realize we are beings that are pulling together. We realize it's not just about me. This is karma. This is realizing causes and conditions and realizing that each of us affects the other in small or large ways. Well, giving seniors their time in the morning first, yes, to do their shopping in more safety. That's such a simple, beautiful one. In Nanaimo, we have a new program called Beacon Buddies, where healthy community members are matched with people who need groceries, medicine, etc., picked up and delivered to them. Beautiful. Zoom meetings with staff in tears, just missing each other. Deep appreciation for our connectedness, and perhaps a type of appreciation we didn't have when we were in a typical world, the pre-COVID world, where we ran around in our little individual bubbles of self-referencing, and we often didn't really have the time of day for our coworkers, the appreciation of what we have. Hearing on the radio, there's a town where for the birthdays, oh, I heard this too, I think it's in Alberta, for the birthdays of kids and elderly, the fire trucks will go by the house with lights and sirens to celebrate. I think that was in Alberta, I read about it. I suspect it will spread. You see, viral spread. We used to talk about a meme or a video online going viral. It means it spreads quickly. Many positivities can spread quickly. The understanding of compassion can spread quickly. Interconnectedness can spread quickly. Paper hearts being put on windows to communicate love and appreciation to first responders. Yes. Zoom yoga class. Oh, yes, exactly. Ways to reach out, to inspire, to be a community. Dharma class. We're gathering together. We're actually able to gather more frequently right now because my physical body wasn't in the same place as your physical body, not in the same country, not in the same time zone for most of the last 6 months. And here we are meeting more regularly, virtually, than we were meeting physically. The distillery is adapting to make hand sanitizer. I think for a lot of us, that was one of the most fun and kind of quirky and unexpected, from alcohol to inebriate the mind, which Buddhists are not really into, keep a clear consciousness, to alcohol to sanitize the hands and keep people safe. Beautiful and wonderful. Our community page on Facebook, sharing little bits of groceries instead of going to the store for one thing. Smart, smart, smart. Folks planting gardens. Yes. Any gardeners in Duncan who want to come do that at my house? Yes. And baking bread. Are you hearing about this baking bread phenomenon? My one friend who I've known for 45 years has always been a homemade bread person. She's got her sourdough starter that she's nurtured for years. And she's like, finally, the late adopters are joining the party of making teams of phoners connecting with association members to care for their needs. It's extraordinary. We've never seen this. We've never seen people reach out to people like this. We've seen glimpses of it in tsunamis, in New Orleans, in 9/11, in the Fort McMurray fires. We've seen glimpses, but boy, oh boy, we've never seen national and international cooperation, well, with some obvious exceptions, between people the way we're seeing it now. People aren't just thinking of themselves. And of course, some are caught in greed, hatred, and delusion, like each of us on this call are sometimes. But let's look at when people transcend their greed, hatred, and delusion, when they look at causes and conditions, and what comes out is compassion, is gratitude, is service. Not every moment, not every day. One person who can bang pots and pans and weep with gratitude for healthcare workers the next morning could grab the last 2 bags of flour instead of leaving one for someone else, because we're not awake Buddhas yet. I'm not being fanciful, naive, or sentimental, but I'm saying look at what we're seeing in the world. Global meditation opportunities, global opportunities to share multiple forms of goodness, of wisdom, of compassion, and connectedness. So take hope. Karma means cause and effect. A cause of current, I would say almost a consciousness raising around how interconnected we literally are, i.e. in passing things to each other. We can pass viruses, we can pass compassion, we can pass cruelty, we can pass hopefulness. But a global consciousness raising, there ain't no way to deny we're interconnected when we're being asked to stay home and completely apart from each other, because interconnectedness could be potentially harmful right now. Oh, one man, one woman is not an island. Even those of us that live on a small island, we're a community. And from this graphic representation of how connected we are, what we're starting to see is also, it's too soon to tell where it will fruition, but also we're seeing people maybe start to understand that when we chase around in our self-referencing lives, taking care of number one, distracting ourselves with shiny objects, it's pretty empty. And now that we're home, almost all of us home, a few of us still working online, a few of you working as first responders or essential services out of the home, we're finding out, I hope, I suspect most of you are, as persons interested in the Dharma and or meditation, that you can survive fairly well without all the travel, without all the plays, the movies, the distractions, and those can be wholesome things. What really matters? Love, compassion, and connection, which is why we're connecting more virtually than ever before, which is why, families are Zooming and FaceTiming and connecting through various platforms. We are more connected than ever. If we choose to see it, if we choose to see the causes and conditions of these arisings. So please, let's do that. So I wanted to bring that causes and conditions and karma teaching forward because it's one of the most profound, deep teachings of all. And it's also something that we need to think about more than ever, which is how do our causes lead to effects? How do the things we choose to spend time and energy on affect us? What I'm so proud of seeing many of you do is you're choosing in the isolation to spend more time on wholesome activities and wholesome mind states, cultivating that which is of value, instead of, maybe in addition to, watching endless amounts of entertainment, which can be very helpful and very wholesome and very mentally healthy right now as well, is to distract and relax the mind. But be careful to notice what we do. I said to someone recently, in say 3 months, which is completely fictional, and I know that, so please let me underline that. Let's say in 3 months, some of the restrictions and requests and wise advice is shifted, and we have more mobility, more ability to gather, more ability to return to some of the freedom that we were having before we were asked to be so wise as we're being. Let's say it's 3 months from now. Let's say, hypothetically, for a thought experiment, let's say that it's 3 months from now and things are back to normal. They won't be, but let's say, how do you want to reflect back on that 3 months? Do you want to look back and say, wow, I ate a lot of junk food and felt sorry for myself and hid in my house and didn't really do anything? Or do you want to look back and say, I really got my yoga practice going. I got a solid meditation practice going. I really found a way to serve, including virtually, other beings. I got my fitness under control. I took better care of my sleep. I realized there's some things I can let go of my life that I was wasting a lot of time on before that weren't wholesome. This is a beautiful time. One of the students on the call here reached out and said he's going to do a self-retreat. Thank you for bringing that up, because this is a fantastic time to do a self-retreat, to schedule a retreat in your home. There are guidelines you can find. You can reach out to me and I will do my best to answer in a timely fashion. My email box is absolutely inundated these days with requests and questions. I will eventually work through and get to yours. But the best way to learn from me is to show up here and in the morning meditations. But how do you want to look back 3 months from now? In fact, that would be a really useful thing to share in the box right now, if you wish. Let's say it's 3 months from now. Let's say a magic wand has been waved, and let's say they say restrictions have been lifted. Go back to life as usual in Canada, America, England, wherever you are. When you look back at this fictional 3-month period, which has now been all fixed, what's one thing, one wholesome, wise thing you would like to have changed in your life? That can be in your mind, in your attitude, in your actions, in your habits, in who you are in the world. What's one wholesome thing you would like to have changed, to say, that's one gift I got out of a profoundly difficult circumstance? I like to call it a gift in a difficult box. What's one thing? To finally have a daily meditation practice. Speaking more openly from my heart to those around me. Beautiful, beautiful. A more peaceful mind. The one thing we have control over is our mind's response to events, beautiful or difficult. Daily walks in nature and deeper self-acceptance. Wow, listen to these, share these, steal the good ones, please. This is why I'm asking you to share them. Hugging all my people longer and tighter and telling them I love them from now until the day we die, not just during a frightening, difficult time. Daily meditation practice, letting go of fear. And may I up that one, letting go of fear. And when it arises again, cultivating letting go of it again. And when it arises again, cultivating letting go of it again, and having compassion for the me that feels fearful. To show up here, finally, forgiveness, letting go of stories too. Exactly. And same, a bit of advice from teacher here. And when stories arise again, letting go of them again. When unwholesome stories grasp the mind, have compassion that I'm not a fully awake Buddha yet, and work with attempting to release the stories again. What's one thing? Small or large, claim it, put it out there. Another person watching may learn from your idea that you'd like to look back and say, that was a gift in a difficult box. That was a gift I took out of a very, very difficult time. Appreciation of life's simple pleasures. Breathing mindfully. To not rush through the day and really pay attention and let go of story and fear. Some themes arising, right? Some themes arising. I wanted to bring that up because I want each of us to say, in the midst of the worst times of our life preceding the COVID pandemic, we've all had the worst times in our life so far until now: a death of a loved one, a cancer diagnosis, a wrenching heartbreak, a loss of a beloved pet, a physical injury, being fired, being maligned. What did you learn from the worst times in your life? The worst times in my life have taught me the most important things. I'm going to share a few more of these. You can see them, but lovely to name them for the recording that doesn't show the comments. Developing bodhicitta, the heart mind of compassion, becoming more creative. May I tweak that a little and say, unleashing my inner creativity. It's like becoming compassionate. The compassion's always there. The creativity is always there in whatever form it takes, but more uncovering the sun of creativity under the clouds of story or self-doubt or etc. An increased capacity for non-judgmental compassion and beautiful. And someone who's still working at home says, I now have a greater appreciation for being at home instead of busy dashing here and there. Who else can resonate with that? I'm blessed, and then I've managed to create circumstances where when I'm on Vancouver Island, I do work at home. My private practice office is upstairs here, and my other teachings and whatnot I do online. So when I'm not traveling on, planes, trains, and automobiles, I am here at home, and I've always loved working at home, but many people are experiencing that for the first time. The trials and tribulations of working at home as well, like your dog freaking out at a squirrel in the middle of a meditation class, things like that. But yeah, a real appreciation for the simplicity of waking up, going to sleep, being at home. So I wanted to bring some of those forward today, and I want to bring a couple more things forward, and then we'll close with a short meditation together on compassion for ourselves and compassion for others. A couple other things I wanted to bring forward. This is a little teaching I gave on one of the morning meditations. I have been teaching Monday to Friday the last 2 weeks, and it will continue this coming week, Monday to Friday at 9 a.m. this coming week on Facebook. If you're not part of that, you can go to Facebook and look up Dr. Cheryl Fraser, my professional page, and the live teachings are on there. And I'd like to thank Neil for taking over for me Thursday, Friday, when something unexpected and unavoidable meant I was not available at 9 a.m. But in one of those morning meditations this week, a few of you heard this, but I want to repeat it here. I actually titled the meditation practice, Be Sexier Than a Squirrel. I stole that great title from a dog trainer who's offering a class online where he says, to work with your dog to have focused attention on you and to be not distracted by the biggest distractions. So your dog comes when you call, looks at you instead of the distraction, which means a safe, well-behaved, beautifully interdependent dog. And so they said, we need you, the owner. None of us own, but anyway, the owner of the dog to be sexier than the squirrel, more compelling than the squirrel. So I borrowed that beautiful analogy because we're having a lot of squirrel arisings in our home. The bird cedar outside the window here. There's a huge squirrel we've dubbed Godzilla. And now we've got a smaller, more normal sized squirrel that comes as well. And it's right outside the window where both my dogs and both my cats can see it. And not surprisingly, my larger dog goes cuckoo when she sees a squirrel, an interloper, an evil, probably murderous squirrel that's going to kill us all in our sleep. So we've had a lot of spontaneous uproars of barking at really inconvenient times, like during a meditation class online, or when I'm speaking to a client, a patient online, or when it's 3 a.m. and you're trying to be asleep, things like that. Squirrels are very compelling. There's the metaphor for the sticky, juicy, crunchy bits of our mind that grab our attention, right? Be sexier than the squirrel in a meditation point of view means cultivate your attention so it is well trained, like a terrifically trained dog. Clearly mine isn't yet. So the squirrel arises, squirrel, on the stage of open awareness. The squirrel arises, it's the biggest, craziest squirrel. It's, I don't know, dancing disco, juggling plates, and smoking a hookah. It is a very compelling squirrel. And you can just sit back in courteous audience awareness, open awareness, and whatever arises, fear, a terrorizing fear story about dying from COVID-19, or your loved ones dying from COVID-19, or the world being wiped out enough that people get terrified and barricade themselves in their homes and turn against their neighbors. The biggest squirrel, the biggest distraction, the biggest story is still in that moment a story. And you can learn to interrelate with it with grace. You can learn to interrelate with it with compassion. You can learn to interrelate with it as just an arising. It's just a squirrel. It's going to be there stealing the peanuts out of the bird feeder, and then it's going to pass away. So I wanted to remind you that, as one of you said, working with the mind, being able to train the mind to non-judgmental compassion, awareness, more peaceful mind, this is what we have full and complete and utter control over. It may not feel like it. Holy, when the mind is going crazy over every squirrel on the planet, it may feel like we have no control whatsoever. But that's where training comes in. That's where self-compassion and patience come in. That's where cultivating the mind of awareness comes in. So that's what we're doing, bit by bit by bit. So for today, we'll begin bringing the teaching part of the class to a close. And we'll move into, I wanted to save a bit of time at the end. I'd like to do a 10 or 15 minute guided compassion meditation. So we begin with open awareness, and we end with really cultivating compassion for beings and for ourselves, and then bring things to a close. Okay. So for this compassion practice, you may wish to practice eyes closed. It's perfectly fine to practice eyes open if you'd like to. So just settling in. And just allowing the concepts, the emotions, the arising, the squirrels, the gorillas, the flowers that have arisen during our time together, allowing them to settle, just arise, do their little dance and pass away. And bringing your attention to your body once again, grounded in the chair or on the cushion. Or on the couch. Just breathing. And I invite you to bring to mind a person that you personally know, or maybe you've heard about or seen on the news. If you can't think of someone you personally know right now, no problem. But someone who's struggling in some way as a result of this pandemic. Maybe they're frustrated the way my nieces are at their schools being closed, or they're an older person who is concerned about their health and the limitations on their movements out of safety right now, or a friend who is ill from the virus or regular flu or cold and is frightened and worried. Someone who's lost their job. So many of us have lost our jobs for now. Financial setbacks. Just bring to mind one person, not yourself for this beginning part, but another person. And just bring them to mind and hold them gently in your heart. Hold them gently. You may know this person very well. You may not know them at all. But even when we believe we know someone very well, we know very little of all the causes and conditions of their life. But what we can know is that they've suffered in their life, they've had losses in their life, they've loved and lost, they've had deaths of loved ones in their life. And we can know they've had beauty and joy and adventures and wonders, and they've behaved in heroic and compassionate ways, large and small. And in this moment, or in this day, or in this week, they're struggling in some manner. At times, the stories, the physiology, the experience is difficult, unpleasant. And bring them to your heart and your mind with compassion. Don't try to force anything or feel any way you don't presently feel. That's just fine. You can imagine, you can pretend, you can invite in a sense of warm-hearted compassion. What does compassion mean? It means to be moved by the suffering of another and to be moved to reduce or eliminate the suffering of another. So when you bring this person to mind, it's natural to feel some tenderness, some loving kindness, some wishing they weren't suffering. And just contact that or imagine that. Knowing these are challenging and unusual times, a tremendous amount of impermanence, a tremendous amount of change. And just sending your kindest, most compassionate thoughts. To this person you've brought to mind. Sending them thoughts such as, may you feel the strength of your deeper self in this time of challenge. May you know you're not alone, even if your physical self is in solitude. May you feel the connection to me and others. May you be free of suffering. May your heart be calm and peaceful and warm. May you be able to coexist with equanimity with whatever arises, pleasant or unpleasant, desired or not desired. May you be able to coexist with equanimity with whatever arises. May you cultivate a warm heart. May you cultivate a peaceful mind. Know that you're not alone. Know that we are all interconnected. And really imagine that person again. And imagine sending them from your own heart warm rays of loving kindness and compassion. reaching across the miles or continents to their heart, whether they're a well-known being in your life or a stranger, a widow in Italy, a frightened youth on the streets of Calcutta, whomever we can bring to mind to send our love to. A healthcare worker you know or can imagine, a composite. Any person working in a grocery store, a pharmacy, a veterinary office, serving with compassion as best they're able, sending our compassion to them. Banging our Dharma silent pots and pans for each and every sentient being. And now bringing that same attention to your own heart and mind. You too are a beautiful being, like the being you brought to mind. You too have had unfathomable events, causes, and conditions in your life so far, some of them tragic, terrible losses, internal and physical and emotional suffering, illness, challenging, difficult life events at times. And you too have had tremendously beautiful, wholesome actions, activities, experiences. You are vast, you contain multitudes. And as best you're able, summon the same level of compassion for yourself in the middle of changing, impermanent, challenging times. May I be strong, flexible, compassionate, and wise as I meet the changing circumstances. May I strengthen my experience of the interconnected nature of humanity, of all beings. May I remember I too am human. May I hold my own tender heart with gentle, loving hands. May I forgive myself if I fail in my compassion and wisdom and non-judgment. And may I simply begin again in this moment. For the past no longer exists. That actor has left the stage, and I can begin again. May I be filled with compassion and grace. May I bring a mind of curiosity and forgiveness to my own good self. May I observe that sometimes this being suffers, and yet I move on the path of awakening. May all beings be well and happy. May we all meet the changing circumstances with grace and compassion. May we understand the truth of impermanence. And may we flourish for as long as we're in this human body with compassion and wisdom, interconnectedness, being of as much service to self and others as is possible. Thank you very much for your kind participation, presence, and good intentions this morning. I will teach again next week. I am not yet sure whether it will be Saturday morning or 8-9 days from now on Monday evening. We will send out an announcement about that in the next couple of days. My intention, as much as possible, is to teach once a week at this time. And it's lovely, lovely to be able to do so. A reminder, if you're interested in the morning meditations, many of you are attending those regularly. It's a beautiful way to start the day. And I thank you all for giving me the gracefulness of being able to start the day with you, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. A 10 to 25 minute meditation, sometimes a dash of teaching in there as well. So thank you all so very much. Thank you for your wonderful kindness to each other. And we're in this together. We always were, but now people are beginning to realize it. Interconnectedness, compassion, and the ability to maybe do things differently moving forward. So thank you all very much. Thank you for your kind comments, and practice like your hair's on fire, says the Buddha. What he means is, don't wait around till some fictional future time when you'll have time to meditate and time to do retreat. There's no time like this very moment. And I think it's pretty hard for us to make an excuse that we have no time to meditate. Find those 30 or 45 minutes. They're waiting for you every day. Take care. Bye for now.